A warm welcome to the next session on inclusive education for the deaf and hard of hearing. I'm very honored to host this panel. One person is not coming, unfortunately, so there's a seat empty right next to me. We'll also have sign language interpretation, just in case you're wondering. And I'll be moderating the next session. I'll start by introducing myself, first of all, and introduce an example of practice, like a project that we're doing. Where's that clicker? That device? Oh, it's gone. Oh, can you hand me? Oh, thank you. I was wondering, it was all gone. This is the technical device allowing us to skip from one slide to the next. I'm Austrian myself. I'll be signing Austrian Sign Language, and there's interpretation into International Sign. I come from a deaf family myself. I was born and raised with sign language instead of a spoken language. And I became the first teacher for deaf children, although the situation back then was the situation that we weren't allowed to officially enter student programs as deaf people. Nonetheless, I managed to do that and started a project in a bilingual school. We had one class that was bilingually taught. But as you might know, the education in Austria wasn't inclusive. So there wasn't a way to actually implement what we had thought we would want to do. I then started policy making in the national organization, the National Association for the Deaf. And I also had 9 years in the Austrian Parliament as a political representative. What you see at the slide here is one project that's called ÖGS, short for Austrian Sign Language, barrier-free. So we're trying to have an accessible project here. Our mission is to allow the deaf community access to the same information and the same services. There's 4 areas that we cover. The first is a sign language video area, then the telephone interpretation service, the academy, and a TV channel that we host. We started with the service center in 2005 and then gradually expanded. This is Gebärdenwelt, our TV channel. The reason why we set up the channel was that there's no TV program in Austria for deaf people. So we established an internet-based TV channel for the deaf community to inform the deaf community about various topics. That's an entirely new format, and it's a very important thing for the deaf community. The next area I would like to expand on is the academy that we have. So we go to different places, schools or working places, to inform people about the situation of deaf people, on how they communicate and how they can actually interact with deaf colleagues, or teach them various specific terms that they need in everyday communication. That's a VRS service that we have that you might be familiar with, but it's not a single location. It's not restricted to one place, but we don't have that 24/7. We're still fighting to have like a 24/7 service to have access to that. The next area is inclusive websites. Most people are not aware that there's also sign language videos allowing them to have fully accessible websites, and that's a huge thing. And it's not an obligation for companies to have that, but it's a very important thing. And it's not just sign language videos, but also descriptors that are spoken, and also other services or things that allow you to have your own mode of consuming videos. Can we just click on that and have a little glimpse of it? Can you click on the link, please?
Inhalte in Gebärdensprache.
Is it working? We've tried it and it worked. Okay, never mind, never mind. Hello? No, this is no longer working? Okay. Another topic that's very dear to me is the International Day of the Deaf. You might know that there's different international days of women or other special days. And the day after tomorrow, there's the International Day of Mother Tongues. And in 2018, we started introducing this, what you see on a slide. So that's the International Week of the Deaf. And the Austrian Deaf Association tried to get famous people to make a statement and support us in getting our message across, that sign language is very unique and very special for deaf people. And we had these statements also translated into national sign. Who you can see here is our federal president, Mr. van der Bellen, who's also wearing the turquoise ribbon as a sign of his support. And we broadcasted that and sent it out via different media. Over the course of the week, we accompanied deaf people in schools or also refugees. And there was one deaf person who tried to get an award for filmmaking, and he was successful in doing that and was awarded. We also have various publications or materials, so booklets on sign language, because up until now the ministry has failed to produce those materials. There are none to this date, so we tried to have some information, although I think it is actually the ministry in charge. That was a very short presentation. I wouldn't want to keep it any longer and hand the floor over to the presenters. I'd ask you to introduce yourselves and maybe show your sign name if you have one. You each have 9 minutes for your presentations, and I hope we then have some more time to cover questions and comments. If you could start, Mr. Mulat, please. I'm very excited to hear your presentation.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mekonnen Mulat. I am from Ethiopia. We have a project called the Social and Educational Program for Deaf and Hard of Hearing in Ethiopia. The project is a kind of joint program of Felm, which is a Finnish-based organization, and the ECMY DASK, which is a local partner organization. So the project is implemented. So the project is implemented in Ethiopia with support from Finland, which I said Felm, in partnership with the Ethiopian Evangelical Church of Mekonnen. We have a school for the deaf in the country, and but we have now this specific project as outreach program of the school in order to reach the whole country in Ethiopia. So we provide 2 major services for deaf and hard of hearing children, which is the educational service, and the other is social service. In the educational services, we have in-service training for teachers and educational officials. The in-service training was provided for all teachers of the deaf and hard of hearing children in the whole country for 3 rounds to build mainly the capacity of teachers in providing quality education and raise their motivation. Because teachers had poor sign language skills and were not able to communicate fluently using sign language with deaf students. The project was started in year 2003. It was mainly aiming to improve both access and quality of provision of education for deaf in collaboration with the government of Ethiopia and Felm. In the social service sector, we provide support in the social and economic inclusion of deaf within the community, which I will talk about. So the in-service training was mainly focused for teachers to fill the gap especially the lack of sign language, and improve their sign language skills and teaching methods and teaching strategies. We also provided awareness raising programs for educational officials, mainly to raise their awareness about deaf and disability issues, so that they could give better attention and support and the provision of education for deaf and hard of hearing children, and also for children with disabilities in general. We have also provided short-term training for regular teachers, a kind of pre-service training for 2 months, so that the regular teachers could enable to accept deaf and hard of hearing children to their schools, especially in the rural areas of the country, where actually educational services not available for these children. After a year, we also give them a follow-up training in order to build their capacities. So when these teachers return back, so they go home to the rural areas, so walk long distances and get out of school deaf children from their homes, and then start to teach them. In Ethiopia, one of the big challenge is that lack of educational materials, and therefore, in order to minimize this challenge, we are also preparing some educational materials for the use of deaf students. So we have prepared supplementary books, sign language dictionaries, and various kinds of materials that could actually support the provision of education for deaf children. We also have established some e-learning centers with using used computers, so with preloaded references for every subject, which could be accessed offline, especially which is important in the rural parts of the country where internet services are not available. We also provide audiological services because in Ethiopia, early diagnosis, hearing screening tests, and hearing aids are not available. Therefore, the project has been doing hearing screening tests during our school visits to different parts of the country, and provided hearing aids for those who could actually benefit from it. And we have tried to get used hearing aids from Europe, which are functional, and fitted them there. That's actually very important, and using the aids, very many children were able to be included in the ordinary classrooms as well. In the social service sector, we are providing sign language interpretation services in various settings, in actually where the need is there, in religious settings, in court cases, and health centers, or where their need is. And we have provided sign language training for people who could actually be in communication with deaf people. So the project provides sign language training for parents, families, and for the community, so that they could
Excuse me, you have the red light.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, so I think I have a couple of studies. We also have tried to empower deaf children by having small cooperative enterprises come together and establish a small-scale enterprise so that they can be self-sustained. And we have provided for very many teachers, thousands of teachers, trainings, and a very large number of deaf children have benefited from the service. Okay, I think I have to stop. So I can go. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Now the floor is all yours. Your sign-in was this again, is that correct? Perfect.
Okay, yeah, I'm Chris Yu from Hong Kong. Yeah, so on behalf of the Center for Signing, sorry, again, my name is Chris Yu. My sign-in is here. It's like that. So I'm from Hong Kong, representing the Center for Sign Linguistics and Deaf Studies, the Chinese University of Hong Kong. I'm glad to be here to introduce our Sign Bilingual program from infancy to secondary school. To emphasize, it is an inclusive education program, so all the deaf or hard of hearing children, or in short, just deaf children, are studying in the mainstream setting. Before we started this program, actually, there are lots of misconceptions about sign language and deaf education. And so many parents are afraid that learning sign language will impede oral language development. But actually, there's a long-standing problem of low achievement in deaf education. The barriers to communication and learning actually affects their academic potentials. So in our study, actually, we find that even though we have the most advanced technology, but their speech perception ability is still very diverse. And about 60% of the deaf children are actually experiencing different degrees of language delay. 31% of the students are also failed in 3 basic subjects in their elementary level. And so only 6.1% of people with hearing loss has received post-secondary education in Hong Kong. It's much less than that of the total population. And so for the last 13 years, a full-trained CELCO system has been established. The CELCO program is developed in order to provide an additional option in Hong Kong other than general mainstream education and special education. It is to resolve problems facing deaf students in Hong Kong. And this full-trained system serves deaf children basically from infancy to secondary education. But currently, we have a trial in a tertiary institute, and there are 4 deaf students there studying with the hearing students with sign language support. In this program, we have 3 basic components. Sign bilingual communication, so all students are using sign language and spoken language. Deaf hearing co-teaching, and we have included a critical mass of deaf students in each CELCO class. So these 3 key components is to ensure that they can have good access to information, they can have mutual support among deaf students and hearing students, and we would like to have great improvement or involvement of deaf adults as teachers who co-teach with the regular hearing teachers. And so the deaf people are providing sign input, and they instill deaf culture in school, and they become a role model for deaf students and hearing students, and they demonstrate how deaf hearing inclusion can be achieved. We have some research study about the program, and we find that actually deaf students in the CELCO program, they show to have comparable classroom participation to their hearing peers in school. And CELCO deaf students show to have a more positive academic performance when compared to the mainstream students. And they have a better growth of all language abilities compared to their deaf peers in the mainstream settings in Cantonese. At the moment, there's a concept of dual exceptionality, stating that students with special needs or disabilities can also be gifted and talented in many different areas. Deaf students in CELCO, when communication barriers are reduced, they can excel in different areas of work. Heidi in the picture, though born with no cochlea on both sides, she has excellent performance in both academic and non-academic areas. In the picture, you can see our Chief Secretary of Administration of the government presented the top 10 Hong Kong Outstanding Teens Award to her in 2018. And actually, our students also got different awards in their studying journey. Every year, we have thousands of hearing students involved in the program, and we are still looking for some results or empirical findings from these hearing students. We are still working hard on it. But from their sharing, we can see that they have very positive attitude towards this program. One student, she mentioned that she had learned about acceptance, how to care, to learn collaborative with others, and to listen to others with patience. Another hearing student, she also stated that deaf people or other underprivileged individuals are not necessarily deprived in the society. Deprivation is arisen from insufficient social support and the absence of equal opportunities. CELCO program has been extended its impact to other places at different levels. We helped to establish a CELCO program in Macau in 2018. And we also provide some on-site and online training and consultation support to two other programs. One in Singapore. Sorry, it's not working. Yeah, and another in Quzhou in mainland China. They both established in 2018. There are also other places like Germany, Scotland, invited us to present our work at their conferences and visited their schools and advised them on the development of CELCO in their places. We are glad to see that the social impact of these programs in these places, such as policy changes of the Macau government to support the program, some direct governmental support in Singapore to establish the program, and formal recognition to the Quzhou program, which was awarded as one of the 8 shining educational initiatives in Quzhou. In view of the program's sustainability, for the last 13 years, there's a continuous increase of demands of CELCO in Hong Kong. We are now serving over 120 deaf children. It is in fact about 1/3 of the most needy group of deaf students in Hong Kong. At the moment, we still require support from different funders. At the same time, we continue to liaise with the Education Bureau. We are glad that at present, they do have a better acceptance of sign language support in the mainstream setting, and they provide more resources for the development of the program. We also established an NGO to generate resources for the sustainability. So we understand that social change is not easy. We have an Asian Chinese story about an old man with an indomitable spirit who dreamed of moving away to huge mountains in front of his house. Other people laughed at him, thinking he was foolish, but he insisted to continue because he believed that even if he could not achieve this mission in his lifetime, his following generations could. So, to me, I am the foolish man, but I'm glad that I have a group of very intelligent team members. And we have the next generation of deaf students who will strive for their rights and working for the disability rights of deaf people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The stage is yours, Ikumi. Ms. Haider isn't here, so we'll skip that presentation. And could you please, all right, that's the right presentation. Perfect, thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Ikumi from Nippon Foundation. I'm deaf myself, so I'm using sign language and sign language interpreter is going to voice my presentation. I forgot to use the click. So first I'd like to explain my organization briefly. Nippon Foundation is non-governmental, independent, non-profit organization which provide grants to the different projects. Our goal is to bring the changes through the social innovation to realize a society where all the people support each other. That's our goal. Our organization is one of the largest private foundation in Japan, maybe in Asia as well. Our annual budget for 2020 is around $600 million US. So with this budget, we support different projects. We have actually more projects than on the screen. And some of them are focusing on the person with disabilities. And we also have some programs, especially focusing on deaf-related areas. Nippon Foundation believes strongly that sign language and spoken languages are equal. Spoken language have English, German, Spanish, different languages. Same with the sign language. We have American Sign Language, Australian Sign Language, Austrian Sign Language. Those languages are so equal. And sign language are the mother language of the deaf people. So that with sign language, deaf people can access everything visually. It can enable deaf people to have full access and full inclusion. Today's topic is inclusive education. Deaf children tend to be placed in a hearing environment in inclusive settings. In that situation, they can't understand what is going on in the classroom. That sometimes hinders the emotional and social development of deaf children. We want to promote the sign language and focusing on 3 programs. One is bilingual education with sign language and written form of national languages. And we also promote the sign linguistic studies and also the legal recognition of sign languages. Before explaining deeply, I would like to touch upon some of the CLPD you are already familiar. Convention on the Rights of the Person with Disabilities. It clearly declares that sign language are equal status with spoken language, and it's the human rights of the deaf people to use sign language. And it also says that in the Salamanca Declarations, it says inclusive education, one is deaf and blind people have a special communication needs, which means sometimes when the deaf people, children needs to be placed in a deaf peers settings in sign language environment. So, as I explained, the Nippon Foundation, the three kinds of projects. One is bilingual education for the deaf children, where they can learn everything through sign language. That means they have a full access. That means the teacher can sign, all the classmates can sign. It's actually full inclusion. And if the students want to go to study in another country, at the university level in the sign language, we support them, we provide them the scholarship. Second programs are the sign linguistic studies. Further sign language research has been started and in other countries, but in Asia, it's still behind. We want more countries to develop sign language linguistics. We need more materials to develop. That's what we are supporting. And we're supporting the sign language teaching materials and also train teachers of sign language, deaf teachers of sign language. And the third programs we are working on is we want the national government to take initiatives to promote sign language programs. That means the government needs to recognize sign language legally. So now I would like to introduce one of the projects we are working in Vietnam. It's the southern part of Vietnam called Don Nai, close to the Ho Chi Minh City. We have the Don Nai University. You can see on the screen the picture. This project is provides the Center for the Studying of the Promoting Deaf Culture, provides the elementary to university level education in sign language. I have a short video clip for this school. Can you show it on the? Can we see that? Can you start the video, please?
Is there no video, or is it just not working?
You have a technical problem? We have the videotape.
Asking the technician here, can we play the video, or is it not possible?
That's very sad, but that's okay. And okay, wow, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to show you the video of the school and how it looks like. It's easier to see what it's like, than to explain myself. But I will try my best to explain how they're working. So in this project, it started in year 2000. Before that, Before, there was no middle school using sign language in Vietnam. So we started to support the program to use sign language. And we already have 150 students graduate from the high school this is a result of the project. And also the 24 deaf students graduate from the university. And those graduate students start to work as the teachers of the school for the deaf throughout Vietnam. That means the deaf children of these schools can look up those deaf teachers as a role model and educated in a sign language environment with the good self-esteem.
I'm very sorry the video is not working.
That's okay. So some students learn, some of the graduate students involved in the Deaf Association in Vietnam and now become the leaders of these associations and working actively as the president and board members of this deaf community and leading the deaf community in Vietnam. So this kind of project is a similar project started in the Philippines and Laos. So last slide, this is the last slide for my presentation. This is our future goals. We have supported the different projects in the different countries, but we need the platform to share the experience and the knowledge. So we need a collaborative network among universities. Secondly, for the bilingual deaf education, there are different programs in each country. So we'd like to set up the framework for the deaf education so that other countries can copy easily. And thirdly, we want to work on the governments to recognize the sign language officially so that we can popularize the sign language in the society. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Now, hands over to the last presentation. Amy, the floor is yours. Can you please show Amy's presentation? Perfect, thank you.
So good afternoon, Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, and all the participants. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. I just want to take a minute to recognize some of the strategic partners that we have in the room. I want to thank Kathy Johnson, who's my colleague, who's here with me today from St. Cloud State, but also the Harkin Institute, and my good friend Richard Trappel from the University of Vienna Confucius Institute. My name is Amy Hebert, and I'm a professor from St. Cloud State University. I'm also a research fellow with the Harkin Institute. I want to talk to you today about some research that I've been doing in a project that we've been working on together. Really, this project started about 20 years ago with my colleague Kathy Johnson, with her work in trying to do disability advocacy and inclusion in China. And just so that you have a little bit of background information, there are about 500 Confucius Institutes around the world, but St. Cloud State's Confucius Institute is the only one globally that has a core value of embedding the CRPD and disability advocacy into their strategic plan. So a little bit about myself. For the last 20 years, I've been working in the area of vocational rehabilitation, specifically with people who are deaf and hard of hearing. And I became interested in working in China about 6 years ago. And I'm also a really firm believer in people-to-people exchange. Deaf individuals have little opportunity for people-to-people exchange, particularly through university campuses. And so it's an area of research that I was interested in. So with spoken language, we know that the benefits to become bilingual or multilingual includes better educational performance, greater job opportunities, enhanced communication skills, improved creativity, better cognitive skills, and improved health. But little is known about whether the same benefits would happen with deaf individuals who are learning a second or third signed language. So the essence of this project was to investigate whether these benefits would be the same for deaf individuals. And so my project, I was looking for deaf Chinese interns who could work in schools for the deaf in the United States, teaching Chinese Sign Language and culture. And we believe that through this project that deaf students in the United States would develop global competency and leadership skills. And conversely, these skills would also be taught and developed by the deaf interns who were also Chinese. So we thought it was a dual benefit to both project members. Currently, it's a pilot project, and we have interns placed at 3 schools for the deaf, one in Minnesota, one in Iowa, and one in Delaware. Our interns are in the United States for 1 year and will be teaching Chinese Sign Language and Chinese culture. It's taken us, my colleague Kathy Johnson and I, it's taken several years to get approval through the Chinese government and through the US Embassy to have this project finally happen. We were successful, and we're very excited about it. So this is a really innovative project because there is a dual impact to both the US deaf school students and staff and also the Chinese deaf interns. The first benefit to all involved in the project is the development of leadership skills through advocacy, empowerment, knowledge building, skill development, and cultural diplomacy. And the second is a second language acquisition, Chinese Sign Language for our US students who are deaf, and American Sign Language for our deaf Chinese interns. But most important, I think, is the development of deaf identity. Our deaf Chinese interns have little opportunity to develop skills for leadership and deaf identity. And so having this project also is teaching them about a lot of the services, support, deaf community that's happening in the United States. We just collected our baseline data in January, and we're looking forward to collecting our first round of data in May of this year. So another innovative aspect of this project is the creation of a joint 3-year master degree program between our universities, St. Cloud State University and Chungcheong University. The significance of this project is monumental. Deaf students in China are very limited in what they can major in. It's mostly art, graphic design, and culinary programs. And there are very few, if any, master degree programs that deaf students are allowed to enter. So, in fact, two of the Chinese interns who were in the United States thought they enrolled in a master program that would develop their art skills, and realized when they arrived on campus that this was a deaf leadership master program. They had no idea they were coming to the United States. But the Chinese deaf interns will complete their first year in the US at a school for the deaf, and this will benefit them by learning English, learning American Sign Language, having advocacy and empowerment skills, deaf identity, and they'll also learn about services that we have in the US. We believe that the areas of impact will be capacity building, infrastructure services, disability advocacy, and scaling up. So our goal is to increase leadership and advocacy among deaf individuals in China. Currently, there are no formalized interpreter training programs. There's 1 or 2 that are really good programs in China, but there's no formalized structural system. And so that's something that needs to be developed. In scaling up, since we've had the interns arrived in the US, we've had several schools approach us wanting to implement the project in their schools. This is our interns and then our program leader. The first young woman is Shai Rong, And she is leading the project and developing curriculum. And then in the photos, the next young man is Ji-Yuan, and he's in Delaware. Yukon is in Iowa, and Jackson is at MSAD. And so I'll just quickly go to our next steps, is that we need to develop curriculum and continue the joint master's degree program and scale up into other schools for the deaf. So, thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you. We have now the opportunity for you to raise questions. One question each. Only one question, I'm sorry, there was an interpreter's mistake. Because I think we're pressed for time. Are there any questions or one question? If not, maybe there's a final statement from each of you? Just one sentence each, maybe, or... Mr. Mulat, would you like to begin with a final statement, a final message to take home?
We have been involved for several years in the services that we are providing. Okay, shall I continue? Yeah, shall I continue?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So we have been providing the services for several years in Ethiopia, and actually achieved significant results. But yet we have the challenges, and especially in the secondary schools, there is lack of sign language dictionaries that we are actually currently doing. So what we are doing currently is that to try to develop a sign language dictionary specific to each subject in chemistry, geography, in both natural and social sciences. Yet the challenge we are facing in the country or in Ethiopia is to get those who are out of school, because the majority of them, about 85% of the deaf population.
Can I ask you to close your statement, please?
Sorry?
Can I ask you to close your statement, please?
Yeah. So they are still out of school, and the question is not placement issues and so on, so to whatever placement, so we are struggling to get those children to school, so we are working in that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you so much. Chris, one last sentence, please.
I think in our program, the most difficult part is to change the policy of the government or the Education Bureau. And I think it may be a difficulties facing deaf education in different countries, especially in the Asia areas. And so I think we should have some more connections between each other and hope that we can sort out some more different solutions to work for the best for the deaf children.
Thank you. Ikumi?
Yes, I'll make it short. So inclusion is not the placement. It is the experience, right? I hope all of us to remember this to promote education. remember that Charlotte said this morning about that World Bank this morning. So I totally agree with her.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say in summary that we would love to cooperate and collaborate with countries other than the United States and China in having deaf students learn a second or third sign language. So if you would like to cooperate with us, we would be happy to talk with you.
I think that was very important to hear that deaf people are entitled to sign language in order to be included as a linguistic minority. And this is something that we should keep in mind, that is worth fighting for. I'm sorry that we couldn't answer questions that you did have in the end, but I would like to invite you to come forward and ask your questions individually. Thank you very much for the session. Thank you very much, everyone.